Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Some call Donald Trump a traitor and the Helsinki summit treasonous. As the media continue their meltdown, a second summit is in the works to be held in Washington. What was accomplished in Helsinki, and what is the point of a sequel summit? Cross-talking summits, I'm joined by my guest, Mark Sloboda. He's an international affairs and security analyst. And in Cyprus, we cross to Alex Christoforou. He is the director and writer for the Duran.com. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Alex, let me go to you first in Cyprus. In this program, I want to talk about what was and what could happen. So let's unpack Helsinki. I don't necessarily think that it was a failure for Donald Trump as it was a failure for the media and their continued meltdown. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was. We don't really know many details as to the actual policy that was discussed between the two leaders in Helsinki. And one of the reasons we don't know that much about the meeting, which we should be discussing policy, because after all, that's why they met, and that's the important part of the summit. All we're hearing about from the media is the meltdown over how Trump is a traitor, how Putin is a thug, how Trump sold out the United States of America, and this mass hysteria is clouding and it's fogging up any discussion as to what the policy that these men discussed was. What did they talk about regarding Syria, regarding Ukraine, regarding nuclear proliferation? No one's really discussing any of the details and the important stuff, and all we're hearing is this complete hysteria about Russia, about Trump, about how he's a puppet of the Kremlin. And it's reached the point where it's madness. I mean, you have to be beyond stupid to believe that Trump is some sort of Kremlin spy, some sort of Kremlin puppet. It's beyond dumb.
Yeah.
But that's the narrative that they're pushing, Peter, 24/7.
Yeah, I know. Mark, your take on this, because, I mean, I don't know if they believe it, but they want the public to believe it. This is the ultimate expression of their rage over the 2016 election. They still haven't gotten over it.
Neither has Donald Trump.
Good point. That's a very good point.
Now, I agree with Alex Christoforou's last statement, that the idea that it's idiocy that he's some type of Manchurian candidate or something, but everything else I disagree with. Of course, there was no policy being discussed because there was no policy settled. That we don't know that there was any policy talked about. I'm not quite sure that Donald Trump really has the capability to discuss policy on a level and a par with Vladimir Putin. Certainly no deliverables, no preparations were made. Anything that Trump and Putin too agreed in private, if they agreed to anything, doesn't exist.
So Trump is partly responsible for the media reaction. Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Trump's performance was incoherent, unhinged. It showed how insecure he was with his own electoral victory. He's standing there next to the president of Russia and devolving into conversations about how he beat Hillary, ranting about the electoral college and so on. I don't know what was going through Putin's head as he was standing there, but all I kept thinking that Putin would think is, my God, they really will think that you are my puppet after this. And perhaps a little bit of Schadenfreude, all right? This is Russia's adversary on the world stage, and its leader is completely melting down standing next to him.
Well, I mean, it's just not, let me go back to Alex here. It's just not, Donald Trump didn't perform as well as he should have. I think a lot of it was self-inflicted. Mark is absolutely right. I mean, here he is in a summit in Helsinki, standing next to Vladimir Putin, and he's talking about the Electoral College. I was in utter shock, okay, that he said that. However, the media, Trump was triggered, and then the media was triggered. I mean, it was this kind of a mutual destruction. Okay, everybody was triggered, and you have Vladimir Putin kind of standing next to him, like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think no matter where Trump goes, or no matter who he speaks with on an international level, it's always going to go back to this narrative. I don't think there's anything the media can talk about anymore, or even wants to talk about, whether it's it's Stormy Daniels and creepy porn lawyer, or Russia meddling, or the fact that he's tearing children away from their moms and immigration. It's no matter what Trump does, it's always going to go back to these basic narratives, these basic points that the media continues to push. And these are points that the American public, especially the flyover states, the people that are going to be voting in the midterm, a large amount of those people that are going to be voting don't really care about. They just don't care about it. The economy is doing well.
Alex, it's a really interesting point, because his base, and I'm going to turn to Mark now, the base seems to be, so what, okay? Donald Trump promised to engage the Russian leader. He has. And again, I will do it. He checked it off on the back of his envelope in his jacket. Met Putin. Let's keep going.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Mark.
I agree completely. Let's talk the numbers, right? I thought Trump's performance was horrible, unhinged, and incoherent, but I'm no longer the target audience. Let's discuss the target audience, okay? So Axios' poll, published in Newsweek, shows that 79% of Republican voters thought it was a successful summit and that Trump did well. I don't know how, but that's what they think.
And presumably these are a lot of Fox viewers, too.
Now, the opposite polarization, 91% of Democrats did not think so, and 62% of independents also did not think so. But this might give Donald Trump going into the midterms. Independents tend not to vote during midterms, and he makes it. Gallup also has a poll out that's very important. It asks the question of a whole series of issues, a lengthy series of issues. What do Americans feel is the most important problems facing the country? Their government and leadership was high at the top, as was immigration, as was racism. Down near the almost absolute bottom is problems with the situation with Russia. In fact, the numbers were so small that it didn't even register statistically. So I think to a large extent, he's right that this again, foreign policy is not necessarily the most important thing on Americans' minds, either during the elections or in between them. And I honestly think that most Americans who are not part of the active resistance conspiracy theorists are a little tired of the whole thing.
Alex, yeah, go ahead, because we just kind of broadened it out.
Just to put,
go ahead.
To put some perspective, yesterday on CNN, Michael Avenatti was back on discussing the Stormy Daniels stuff and the Michael Cohen stuff. It's just in a continuous loop.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
You're absolutely right, but one of the things, Alex, I think that the liberal media doesn't want to talk about is that Donald Trump's popularity is higher than it is with Congress, higher than it is with the media. So, I mean, again, if you kind of step back, there's a broader perspective here. In the second half of the program, I want to talk about the Washington summit. But Alex, I want to stay with you. One of the things I found kind of curious, and looking at cable, particularly at Fox, I didn't see a lot of people coming out defending the president. Very few, except Gorka came out.
Rand Paul.
But that's different, okay? Because he's not part of the Trump team. But I didn't see a lot of Trump world people coming out defending the president. I found that odd. Alex.
Well, I think when it comes to Russia and to Putin, you're going to get both left and right speaking out in unison. And I think it's a situation where Trump cannot win when it specifically comes to Russia and when it comes to the intelligence community. Because in today's world, if you say anything, in today's America, if you say anything against the intelligence community, anything, it's heresy. You just cannot do it. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. I
find that absolutely hysterically disappointing, Mark. There's a lot to criticize the intelligence community for. Lots of it. For decades, okay? I mean, this is how this manufactured consent that the media is complicit with. We should be having a conversation about it, okay? But I know that's politically risky, and I'll give Trump that. He just stumbled his way through that criticism. That's what disappointed me. Go ahead.
Yeah, never mind how many times the intelligence community in recent memory has lied to the American people, from the Iraq War to James Clapper lying on surveillance, to Libya, talking about genocide, to Syria, moderate rebels, right? We've heard all of this. But it's pure partisanship. Right in the run-up to the election, when Democrats believed that Comey's investigation of email servers, which really wasn't an investigation at all,
that we know now,
they were decrying the intelligence community at the time. They thought it was sabotaging their queen-to-be's victory. So you see how partisan shifts opinions on this completely regardless of any real facts. I think the media, I think we should stop talking about it as the corporate mainstream media and start talking about it as the media intelligence complex.
There's a good point.
When John Brennan and James Clapper, just out of their positions as the very embodiments of the deep state at the CNI and Director of National Intelligence, are now the pundits giving you your propaganda, telling you what you should think about such things, particularly foreign policy, directly, not even a middleman.
Let me go to Alex here before we go to the break here. Alex, Comey, Clapper, Brennan, not unsurprising, they're coming out as the spokespeople for the intelligence community through the good services of the liberal media. They all need to be deposed, and they all need to be questioned about their behavior during the 2016 election.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things about Trump derangement syndrome is that every now and then it starts to unmask another member of the deep state. And in this go-around, we saw Brennan unmasked. We've seen Peter Strzok, we've seen Comey, we've seen all these guys, but in this particular case, we saw Brennan really lash out, and now a lot of people are asking questions about Brennan and his role in the entire Russiagate Steele dossier narrative that's been going on. So Brennan almost brought focus to himself because of his hysteria.
John Brennan, being the spokesman, supposedly decrying Trump's talk about a deep state, he is the deep state. So I'm not sure he's
I would posit he's treasonous. Mark, I have to jump in. We have to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on summits. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter LaBelle. To remind you, we're discussing summits. Okay, let me go back to Mark here. And right before we went to the break, I think you mentioned the Washington Post.
So I mean, the Western media was decrying this summit as Pearl Harbor, the Gulf of Tonkin, 9/11, Kristallnacht. These are the descriptions I heard of it. It wasn't any of those things. It might have been embarrassing. Trump wasn't prepared for it. But the Washington Post summed up, I think, the idea of their view coming out of the summit perfectly. Washington Post article by Eugene Robinson yesterday. God bless the deep state.
Oh my God.
I think that only the deep state stands between us and the abyss at this point. And they're not even hiding it anymore. I mean, they're not even pretending otherwise. Meanwhile, Russian media has the exact opposite perspective. They have a very sober and muted respect coming out of this summit. They do not regard it as Putin's victory over the United States or anything like that. In fact, they worry that Trump's performance was so bad and he faces such significant domestic partisan political hurdles over it that it may end up hurting U.S.-Russia relations rather than moving them a step forward.
You know, Alex, let me go back to you in Cyprus. I think that Mark sums it up very well there. Why the second summit so quickly on the heels of Helsinki? As you pointed out in the top of the program, we really don't know what policy was discussed, though we may talk later. I have a feeling that some of the ideas that were surrounding Syria are already being enacted, okay? We could talk about that a little bit later. But, I mean, why so quickly? Does Trump want another bite at the apple? Go ahead, Alex.
I think this is kind of typical Trump in a way, in that he had his performance in Helsinki. After that performance, and after probably a lot of pressure, I imagine from his own insiders and from his own staff, he gave kind of a quasi-apology, quasi-walked it back a little. He didn't walk it back full, but he did kind of apologize a little bit to the intelligence community, and he did say, I recognize that Russia meddled in the elections.
I thought that looked like a hostage video.
Yeah, I did.
He had a political gun pointed at the back of his head.
Go ahead, Alex.
You could tell Trump wasn't buying into it, and you could tell that he was just saying it because he was probably being obliged or forced to say it. And then you have the tweets coming out about another summit. And so I think this is very much Trump's way of just kind of maybe, pressing forward. And as we said, he hits that checklist. And no matter what hits him, he wants to tick off those things on his checklist. And he wants to also stick it in the face of these deep state guys in this media and to show in a way that, look, I may have given a little bit of a walk back, but I'm not backing down. And I think the next move for Trump, before he goes to any kind of summit in Washington, he needs to hit that base. He needs to go somewhere in Middle America and give some rallies, give some speeches. That's where his wheelhouse is. I think we're all starting to realize and understand that Trump, at this moment, as U.S. president, going on these summits and meeting with these world leaders is not his forte. This is not where he's at his best. Where he's at his best is where he's talking to his base, and he's talking about things that are important to him. The wall, immigration, these things you can tell he cares about these things, and that's when he's at his best.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, first of all, what did the media expect from Helsinki? Did they want a meltdown summit? I guess that's what they wanted. Well, but what would that achieve?
They were afraid that the United States Trump would recognize the reunification of Crimea with Russia, or that some deal would be reached in the Donbass and Ukraine, or that Trump would do what he actually said he would do and pull U.S. troops out of Syria, something like that. So this is what they're afraid of. None of this that we know happened.
Yeah, but okay, well then. It didn't happen, so what's your crystal ball tell us about a summit in Washington? Yeah. Because what has to change for a different, at least the optics to perception? I think that's why I'm very cautious about this. Yeah. You and I talked before many times. We're both basically on the same page. It has to be about policy and what you achieve.
I don't think this is a good idea for either side. I think Cristoforo is exactly right. Trump needs to attend to his midterm elections. Domestic politics is all he really seems to care about anyway.
So when is this summit? Before or after the midterms?
If I would think the smart thing would be to put it after the midterms. He seems to think otherwise, and that he can spin what will surely be the mainstream media fury to his advantage.
Let me ask Alex Cristoforo about that. What do you think, Alex? I mean, I think they're being very cryptic on purpose. Summit before
I think it's after. I can't imagine him fitting it in before November. I mean, he's got the Supreme Court justice to get into place. He's got a rally, and he's got to go to get the Republicans elected to win the House and the Senate. I just don't see how Trump can possibly even fit it in, even if it is a good idea. Yeah. I don't think how he can fit it in until way after the midterms.
Yeah. Let's not even talk about winning the House and Senate. Let's talk about not losing them too badly, as is normal for a president's midterm elections.
But the generic vote is actually favoring a minimal decline for the Republicans. But we've got a long way to go.
We've got a long way to go, and we learned in the last election that polls are not the end-all, be-all of everything. So I think from a Russian perspective, they're actually interested in getting things done. The Western media seems that all Russia wants is legitimacy, as if the only way the Russian president can gain legitimacy is if America's imperial grace descends on him and he blesses him with the chrism of legitimacy and so on. This is ridiculous. Russia wants its legitimate national and security interests respected and compromised and dealt with on by a rogue hyperpower that thinks the whole world is its sphere of interest and it's above international law. So, there was one good positive thing I heard coming out of this summit, very quietly, not being reported on by the Western media. The Russian state TASS information service has it. Closed-door meetings, finally, about a new START and a renewal of New START and a new intermediate-range nuclear forces treaty are going on. If they're smart, it will also include cyber warfare, which the U.S. has always denied. But that is positive. But that doesn't need Trump and Putin sitting down to do that. That can be done. It should be done at a lower State Department and other security apparatus
You're
level.
absolutely right. Now, Alex, I'm going to get back to you because I don't understand. I mean, it seems to me that Trump wants to paper over what he probably believes deep inside, the less than stellar performance in Helsinki. He wants another shot at it. But Mark is absolutely right. I mean, we know what the issues are. They have been identified. And now we need to get the State Department and the Russian Foreign Ministry to get to work on them. I don't understand why they have to meet again so shortly, okay?
Well, maybe Trump also sees it as being in Washington, he'll be more comfortable and he'll be in better form when it's in Washington. You know, he hosted Macron in D.C., and obviously Trump is more comfortable in that element. But we also have to remember, Russia also has to agree to some sort of summit in D.C. So I just don't see it as something that's going to happen in the near future. And I hope it doesn't happen in the near future, because I think that Trump, the United States, as well as Russia, whether they're dealing with their own stuff or whether they're working on stuff together, have a lot of stuff to do before these two leaders meet again.
Frankly, from just a Russian, very pragmatic standpoint, on top of maybe hurting Trump more domestically and the issue, can any policy be done, there's also a question of basic security with the hysteria, the neo-McCarthyite political current. Russian security would have to really be on the ball.
That is the very first thing I thought of. Absolutely the first thing I thought. Mark, can maybe flesh this out a little bit more. I mean, how do you think Vladimir Putin understood the summit? Because is Trump a president because of the hostility of the deep state and of the media? Is he in a position really to move the needle in one way or the other on any of these issues?
Yeah, the official word from Putin is that the summit was more substantive than he thought it would be. I don't want to presume to know how substantive he thought it would be beforehand. I don't see much substance coming out of it, at least not what we know publicly. But I think what a lot of the Russian elite are at least worried about is that Trump is not a partner who can get things done, that he's not in control of his own foreign and security policy, that anything that Russia, any meeting, any photo ops like this that Trump seems to crave, the limelight of the camera, would actually hurt him more than harm him, and isn't going to do Russia any favors as well. But I think we should talk about what Trump's motivation is. I mean, I think it's clear he's got personal grievances against many of the leaders of the EU and his own intelligence committee over the election. I think he does admire Putin. I know that's an unpopular political opinion in the U.S. I think he sees what the Russian people see, how much Putin has done for the Russian people since the catastrophe of the 1990s, how far he's brought the country back, both on a domestic, individual level, when we're talking wages and so far, all the way up to Russia's strength in the world. But Henry Kissinger has been pushing the idea that what should be going on a grand strategic perspective is a realignment of the U.S. geopolitically, trying to drive apart the growing alliance between Russia and China.
Don't you think it's too late?
Oh, I think it's too late. I absolutely think it's too late. I hope it's too late. I think that Putin is far too intelligent at this point. He knows that the next election is going to see a reversal. But Kissinger said back in 1972, he said, in 20 years, speaking to Nixon, your successor, if he's as wise as you, will wind up leaning towards the Russians against the Chinese, because it was Kissinger who helped lead Nixon to split.
Last 30 seconds go to you, Alex. Maybe the summit in Helsinki and Washington the plan is to make sure relations don't deteriorate more, just damage control. And if that's the thought, I think it's wrong-headed. Go ahead, Alex.
It's possibly with Trump. You don't know. My hunch is there's so many actors that do have an agenda within Trump's inner circle. Let's not forget, we haven't talked about Mike Pompeo. We haven't talked about Bolton and what he wants and what's his motivation. So I think there's a lot of forces at work that are also pulling and pushing Trump in different directions. And I think you have Trump, who's, at the end of the day, I just don't see he's as engaged in foreign policy and international affairs as he is with the domestics.
On that note, Alex, I'm going to jump in here. We've run out of time. Many thanks to my guest here in Moscow and in Cyprus. This is the end of our broadcast segment. Stay with us for the extended version on our YouTube channel. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.